So we had some trees on the line, and I couldn't even call out on my cell phone from Portage to report them. So. But I was able to use the 800 radio.
That's a public safety grade system.
What should I do here?
Tagging off of Bobby, thank you, Rowan. I know that you probably had a lot more work during the storm in making sure that everything was operational. I know you do it every day anyways, but your alert system goes up when we have things going on. Thank you to our law enforcement and dispatchers and everyone that took on the extra load. Valerie, all the extra work getting the messages out to all of us so we know what's going on, because I was completely clueless at my house. It looked just fine from my window until I got all of Valerie's notices. So that's important that you take care of that for us. And then I think the community forgets 800 radios. So when we talk about lost communication and all the people that are not receiving, I always forget when we talk about the end of the trail and the need for the bus driver to be able to get the call into the school if the bus breaks down. And so thank you for the reminder of how many radios we have out there and how many people are impacted and how important this system is for all of us to talk to each other. It just works, and we just all use it until it doesn't work, and we forget all the work that goes into making sure that it's operational.
And I'm always amazed, 11 towers, 800 radios, pagers, and this one person supports all of that.
I know.
It's really, really amazing. Really lucky.
I'm notorious for turning my knob in the wrong direction, and Rowan, you haven't had to fix my radio for me for a while.
Thanks for all you do. Just to reiterate the other comments, and and Rowan, especially what you do at the towers, and Rena for your administration of the department. And it's a real challenge here in many respects to be remote, but I think in your area you have the most formidable one because there's a lot of empty space out there between all these things, so we got to rely on that tower technology as well as the internet. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I want to commend both of you for all of the work. Well, Rowan, your work with towers, and not just your work with the towers, but your communications skill. I've learned a lot from you over the years. It's really complex, and but if you really listen to Rowan, you can eventually get it. Almost, not really, but I still don't know what a radio wave is. But just the networking, the information network is pretty complex, and you deal with the reality of our vulnerability, living as remotely as we do, geographically challenged, but also geographically blessed. So, and Rena, you're balancing the aesthetic, well, both of you, all of you, trying to balance the wilderness aesthetic with the ability to keep everybody safe has been pretty remarkable. And again, that takes some pretty serious communication skills too. So really appreciate your work, and really appreciate now the complexity of our emergency systems are pretty amazing. And when I hear people out in the community saying we don't need we don't need emergency systems, and so they're like, oh really? Mm-hmm. Or why do you spend so much on them? Or those kinds of questions. I had no idea how complex it was. I could only imagine. So you've helped do that interpretive dance between those of us who don't get it and the realities of the situation. So thank you.
So it was so important for you to come before us, because you give a good perspective as to what's going on, and the depth of everything is just amazing. I look at the services that we get for our cell phone, AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon. They just don't seem to want to work with us, do they? Like in the Tofty area and that.
I don't see as big in numbers.
Yeah, right.
Revenue, return on their dollar.
Yeah. So we have some dead zones with that, but it's okay, I guess, for now, because you do great with the other services. So thank you again. Appreciate it. Yes, Commissioner Duca?
Bobby was just calculating numbers over here, and when you talk about 800 radios, that's 800 public servants, and then we have a population of the entire county of 5,000. Take away the children sitting over here. Sorry, we were talking during discussion, but so just think of how many people in our community provide service to us, and you make sure that we can talk to each other. So thank you. Thanks for pointing that out, Bobby.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. So Timothy Nelson, you're going to appear before us with a couple of items.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. First item that I have is basically looking at some zoning ordinance amendments. Every year, as we go through the Planning Commission processes month by month, we look at ways in which we can improve the hearing process and such. And then also, we get through the land use legal training seminars and workshops that are put on by the attorneys associated with MCIT. And what we have presented here are some ideas that have come up through basically that training. We have had the public hearing already at the Planning Commission level last month. And I'll just go through these real briefly, one at a time. The first one in section 505, 10.05, essentially brings the conditional use permits that are granted in line with variances. For many years now, we've had a sunset clause on variances that when they're granted after 3 years, if they're not used at all, then they basically sunset and they would have to be reapplied for. And the principle of that is the fact that local characters, the areas and such, they change over time. And we have been faced with variances that were granted in the 80s and the 90s that would not be granted now, just because of the local character, the quality, and of the area. And so basically it's a sunsetting clause, and this particular change would bring the conditional use permits that are granted and interim use permits in line with what is already existing in our ordinance for variances. The second item in 14.02, there was back about 10 years ago some fluctuation in the standards for granting of variances, and it went through from statutory changes to case law changes, and they had for a while separated out the consideration of variances that were after the fact in nature, structures that had already been built and such like that, and from those that were just regular variances that were requested before any construction took place. So in recommendation from the attorneys at that time, we adopted these after the fact criteria into the ordinances about 10 years ago. Since then, the statutes have changed again, and we were advised that there really isn't any legal basis for us to have separate standards for after the fact for regular variances. So basically, the recommendation was to go ahead and eliminate those from consideration. And the last couple issues are in section 15.04 in the hearing procedures. And the first one basically sets a time limit, a deadline with which to receive written comments that would go in front of the Board of Adjustment or the Planning Commission. Many times we've run into cases where at the Planning Commission meeting or Board of Adjustment meeting itself, someone would come with a large stack of papers and hope that that would be considered, and there wasn't really enough time for the board to consider all of that information and make a decision that night. So we basically are setting the deadline of the Wednesday prior to the meeting so that we can get all of that information to the Planning Commission or Board of Adjustment in time for them to give proper consideration and review. And basically, the intent would be if somebody does come with additional information that the board would like to consider, we do always have the option to table that meeting and repost it for the following month. So it's not as though there is a desire to not get that information. It's just that it needs to be in the information packet ahead of time, so there's time with which the board can consider that. And the last item is basically kind of what we already do. It's just codifying the fact that the board chair gets to set a time limit if there's a contentious case or something, that there's a lot of people that wish to speak to a particular issue, that the chair gets to set a time limit for each person to speak, maybe 5 minutes or whatever, depending on the number of people that are there. So basically, we've already been doing that, but that just puts it into the ordinance form. So those are the changes. As I said, we did have the public hearing for it and received basically no comments from the public. We did have some questions from the Planning Commission members about that issue of setting a deadline for written information, but in the end they were satisfied with the fact that we're not denying any information to come in. It's just that we want the board to have sufficient time to be able to consider it, and if it does require more time for consideration, that we can extend it into the next meeting and table that item.
Okay, I guess my question would be, refresh my memory as to when the meetings are held. Planning Commission is held once a month?
Planning Commission, Board of Adjustment, they're
yeah.
together. They're two different committees, actually, but they do meet at the same time and share the same membership. And they meet monthly, predominantly, on the second Wednesday of every month. If there's a lot of caseload, then there are times where we do hold special meetings, which would then fall basically 2 weeks in between each of the monthly meetings. So it would be predominantly the fourth Wednesday of the month.
So the 4 o'clock is the day before the meeting on the second Wednesday of the month?
No, the 4 o'clock would be the Wednesday before.
So a week before?
A week before.
Week before.
Good
Yes.
clarification.
So
And that
everybody
note,
hear
that would be posted in all of the notices that are sent out. We have to, by law, send out written notification to all the neighbors within a certain geographic location and also into the newspaper. And so that would include listing the deadline.
So it is in the paper, obviously, too?
Yes.
You'll have it there.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. Okay, we'll start with discussion. Commissioner Severson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. These changes make lots of sense, and I particularly like the hearing procedures one, so that people have ample time to consider. That being struck with something in your face makes it really hard, and people have different ways of reacting to that, and this alleviates all of that sort of tension, and it's a good thing.
No comments or questions? I think it makes sense. Improvement.
Commissioner Duger?
Yeah, the week before is kind of, our board packet, they have to get it in by closing of business on a certain day so we can have it. And I can tell you that we have had planning meetings where each commissioner sat there with a room full of people in a big fat packet, and literally we stopped the meeting to read the packet. So there's the audience staring at us while we're all sitting, because they would bring it in right at the time because we haven't had this laid out before. And so, yeah, I mean, they'd bring 10 pages and we would all stop and sit and read through it. And, the chair has been great to say, has everyone had time to read it before we get the meeting started again? So this is nice. And we do appreciate those packets from the public because they bring a different perspective. It's not that we don't want them, we want them, but we want to be able to have time to digest them. And when you're sitting at a meeting, you get a packet and there's information in there, you have no time to research it at all. So it's very helpful.
Okay.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Any further discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you on that, Tim.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. And the second item is an appointment. We did have a resignation from the Planning Commission and Board of Adjustment. As I indicated, we do have two boards. We have the Planning Advisory Commission, and then we have the Board of Adjustment. In some counties, those are two distinct committees that are even held on different evenings. The meetings are held. And in our circumstances, as well as a great number of rural counties, basically it's the same membership, and we hold our meetings kind of consecutively. One will hold a meeting, and then that'll adjourn, and then hold the next meeting. And the Planning Commission has 7 people on it. The Board of Adjustment has 5. And the Board of Adjustment is generally 5 of the people of the 7 people on that committee. And when we get openings, there are 2 people who will basically serve on the Planning Commission, and after a certain time, somebody resigns from the Board of Adjustment, and then they would kind of be stepping into that position. Well, we had David Seaton resign from both the Planning Commission and Board of Adjustment, and we do one of the members, the longest serving member currently on the Planning Commission that isn't on the Board of Adjustment is Donald Fear, and definitely requested or asked if he would be interested in serving on the rest of that position out, and he did indicate his willingness to go ahead and serve in that position. So the motion before you today is to go ahead and just approve Don Fear. We do have a position that's opening up. We have term limits that are set, and so we do have another position that's going to be opening up at the beginning of the year. And fortunately, yesterday, we did receive an application in, and I will probably be bringing that application before you next week or at the next meeting to fill the vacancy that's in the Planning Commission.
So the Planning Commission is the one that Dave Seaton is?
Both of them.
Madam Chair, yeah, the Dave Seaton is a member of actually both.
Both,
And so
yes.
his position would be vacating both the Planning Commission and the Board of Adjustment. Donald Fair is currently just a member of the Planning Commission. He would be stepping in to take Dave Seaton's place on the Board of Adjustment. So that would leave one opening right now on the Planning Commission, with which, as I indicated, we do have an application and we would be able to fill at the next meeting.
Do these necessarily come from different districts, or do you like to kind of spread it out?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Madam Chair, and we historically try to make them geographically representative. Certainly, some of the local character, the areas on the west end are different from the east end, is up from the Gunflint, and so we do try to have a geographic diversity, and we're doing a pretty good job at it. We're not held to that by any requirement in the ordinance or anything. This one is taking someone out of the Gunflint and replacing that position with someone towards the west end. But there are a few people up the Gunflint, a few people on the west end, a few people on the east end, and so there will still remain some geographic representation from all areas of the county.
Okay, thank you. Questions or comments? Commissioner Deschamps? Commissioner Dukert?
Just a reminder to the public, we have a position opening in January. That would be Chinny's district that is currently in that spot. So if you would like to be on there, we meet once a month. It's lots of fun. Please join.
No questions, comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions, but I would make the motion to accept the resignation of David Seaton from the Cook County Planning Commission and Board of Adjustment, and to appoint Donald Fair to the Board of Adjustment to fill the open position.
Support.
Okay, I don't think we have any further comments, or because we accept his resignation. Wish he could stay on, but I know that there's always reasons why people need to move on. So all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Okay. Noxious weed lady, Michaela. Good
Thank you,
morning.
Madam Chair. Yes, so for anybody who doesn't know me, my name is Michaela Klingeman. I'm a conservation technician for the Soil and Water Conservation District. So today I'm here on behalf of Kristen Foster. She wasn't able to attend here, unfortunately, so she asked me to come and talk about this upcoming grant opportunity that we would like to put in for. So the primary ask is just for the board's authorization to submit a grant to the Minnesota Department of Agriculture's Noxious Weed and Invasive Plant Grant. So we would like to submit that for some treatments along county road right-of-ways, in addition to kind of targeting and eradicate species that's present in Cook County, Dalmatian toadflax, and then also to host a landowner education workshop. So landowners can come, learn about how to ID invasive plants, and then also learn how to treat them on their property. And this is a collaborative effort through the Cook County Invasive Species Team, so we'll be partnering with Extension and Sugarloaf and obviously the Highway Department, Soil and Water, and all those other member organizations.
Okay, it's an ongoing situation, isn't it?
Yes.
Especially with that tansy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we all need a workshop on that, plus other things, too. The workshop would be like later in the spring?
It would probably be in the summer when everything's kind of in bloom and easy to identify. We were thinking of hosting it in July and then at Lutzen Town Hall just as a primary thought, because one of the treatment areas would be the road right-of-way along the Caribou Trail, because there's some kind of up-and-coming garden valerian, which isn't really a listed noxious weed, but it's definitely not native and could be a problem. So just targeting that area, so if there is treatment going on and landowners have questions, they can just come right there and learn about it for themselves.
So Caribou Trail, other roads that would be affected?
For treatments, we are considering doing Caribou Trail up to the Honeymoon Trail, just that primary 7-mile section, and then also doing a follow-up treatment on the Gunflint Trail Scenic Byway. And that would be from the water tower to about Hedstrom's Lumber.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So questions or comments? Commissioner Severson?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Michaela, and the Department of Soil and Water to be working with so many other agencies. It really synergizes everybody's efforts when you try to approach a problem this way. So I really appreciate your efforts, and it seems like a good collaborative effort to get rid of noxious plants, which I'm not always, well, I am very ignorant of which ones are noxious and which ones aren't, but I was shocked the day I found out that lupin were actually an invasive species. So, so some of the invasive species are quite lovely, but it's a good effort to prevent their taking over and becoming a monoculture, and we know that's never good. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bershheim?
Thank you. It's a very, very important project and timely and good collaborative efforts from various groups.
Commissioner Dukirk?
Nice job, Michaela.
Thank you, Heidi.
No questions.
Motion to approve.
Support?
Any other questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
There you go. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so Brady, are you ready for your...
Madam Chair? Yeah. Yeah, this is a request. The board by motion accept a deed for land from Evelyn Larson as payment in full of a promissory note from Brian and David Larson for a revolving loan dated May 22nd, 2008, and in exchange for a release of a mortgage from Brian and Jane Howard held as collateral for the revolving loan. The committee discussed this and approved this request back in August, and a vote 6 in favor, 1 against. The land offered by Evelyn Larson is 5.04 acres off of County Road 60. The mortgage to be released is for a home at 116 3rd Avenue West in Grand Marais. The committee felt that the loanees had been trying hard but not been able to keep up on the payments. They're about 3 years behind. The collateral for the loan is the home of one of the owners. Committee felt the best option was to accept this offer of land in exchange for release of them from the program and from their loan. This, if it's approved, then this will be coming back to you to request sale of the land.
Okay. So we will open it up for questions or comments. So the land, is that equal to these payments? Is that the whole idea?
It's not equal, but we don't know if it's equal. If you're talking equal, that would be, the assumption would be that the assessed value is equal
Oh.
to what's still owed. And no, it's short of what's owed. Assessed value is somewhere in the mid-40s, and the value of the loan that we would be releasing was $56,832 at the time the payments ended. But that was 3 years ago. The likelihood of receiving that we considered was fairly low, and this seemed to be the best option.
Okay. Commissioner Deschamps.
I think we talked about this probably about a year ago with these certain individuals, and I believe when they probably signed their loan agreement, it wasn't to be repaid with land. So that's what I got.
So Brady, with land, our hands are kind of tied. Like there's certain requirements when the county sells land that's different than when an individual sells land. I know we've
There's some
sold tip of the trail numerous times.
Yeah, this is not tax forfeit.
Okay.
So this is selling it fee-owned land. There are still some rules. For example, we have to advertise it for 3 weeks in a local newspaper. You guys have to approve that. We have to do it by bid or auction to the public, but we don't have the same kinds of restrictions as we would for tax forfeit land. The money has no specific uses as it does in tax forfeit, where you have to break it out. Part of it goes to the school, part of it goes to any town where it may exist and things like that. So there's no restrictions in that.
Okay, so we can, within a month, sell this land,
We could.
hopefully get money for it.
And that's what we have to discuss before we bring it back. I'll be talking to the land commissioner at least, and probably others. What's the best time to sell it? You know, is there anything we should do, maybe to prepare the land, things like that, so.
Okay.
It's not exactly on County Road 60, but there is an easement for a driveway, in case that's a question.
Commissioner Bershheim.
Well, I serve on the revolving loan committee and been involved in this, and it's been an ongoing negotiations for some time and a lot of efforts over the years, and I think I can speak for the group that we felt this was the best possible outcome we could come out with. The other route would be foreclosure on a home. And we talked to an attorney about that process, and just felt that this is maybe the best way to resolve the issue, considering all the factors.
Okay. Commissioner Stephenson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I can understand the position of the revolving loan committee, but I feel like I'm in a different position, and so I'm looking out for not just the counties, but the revolving loan operates on cash. When the revolving loan fund does not have cash, it can't do the work that it needs to do to make it a viable tool, and it's a tool for economic development. I don't know if I would This doesn't seem like it seems like a bad solution on so many levels, but I understand. It may be the only option, thinking of all the people involved, and who wants to foreclose on somebody's home. But that's why you use homes as collateral, because there is value there. I'm particularly when the values aren't even close to the same. And of course, we don't know that, but
Right.
from what I know of or feel about real estate right now, land is not exactly selling like hotcakes, so our assessed value may not even be the market value. I mean, we don't know that, so.
Yeah, the difference right now is about $10,000.
If we can sell it for.
If you can sell it for the assessed value.
And if we can even sell it.
Okay. Yeah, I was.
There's a lot of ifs in there that make me nervous.
Yeah, so the selling of it would go to auction. That's how it would be sold, correct?
It
might
can be
an
sealed bids or
online-
auction.
Sealed
Yeah.
bids, online auction. So even getting mid-40s would probably be pretty slim. But
Even
Anyway,
less.
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I could just respond
Yeah,
to
sorry.
that. I understand where you're coming from, and, if we did not go down this route, then we're going to get into another whole situation of what is the property worth and what we could get out of it, and that's an unknown. So at least we know what we're getting into here. In other words, if we foreclosed on the property, we just don't know how much we can recoup from that.
There's a loan ahead of us. There's a mortgage on the house.
So it's,
The-
go ahead, Brady.
Yeah, the tax value on the house and the existing loan is, I don't have that in my memory right now, but it is larger than the value on the piece of land. But you don't have the costs to go through the process either. And we don't know the condition of the house either, so.
So if it's a sealed bid, then when we open those, it's just whoever bid the most? So we could get $1,000?
We don't have to accept.
Okay. We also don't have to foreclose. We can send it back and say, you sell the land and bring us the cash and negotiate from there.
yeah, there's a lot of,
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think that's good business on the revolving loan parts to be, I think we forgave some money for the higher ed building last year, and now forgiving another well, if you got $40,000 for the land, that's another $17,000 loss. How long are you gonna stay in business if you keep losing money or forgiving loans? I'd make the motion to send this back to the committee and find a better solution.
I think
Support.
Brady,
He made a motion, so I'm
Yes.
supporting it so Brady can talk.
so then Brady has comment.
Oh, just pointing out the history of the loan fund. Our loss ratio is, from the banker on the committee now and bankers in the past, it's, just as a general comment, it's very low. It's lower than commercial. We're not making a lot of risky loans in comparison to the banking industry, and actually that's kind of part of the mission of it is not just to save capital, but to make loans that might be a little riskier than banks, to help them on some of these loans. So that's been the background. That's the purpose of the committee, is to help loans that might not pass otherwise, and businesses that might not get a loan, that might not exist. And it's done quite well for the last 30 years.
So we have a motion to send this back to the revolving loan committee? All in favor?
I just have
Oh,
one more
yes.
comment. I understand the purpose and the mission of the revolving loan fund, and I'm all in favor of protecting that mission and helping people, and sometimes you do take a bigger risk. I'm not sure that that was exactly what happened in this instance, but what was I going to say? I'm also concerned, I'm concerned for the reputation of the revolving loan fund and the precedent set. And I just feel like there maybe could, so I'm in agreement with the motion that's been made, because it doesn't say absolutely no. It says maybe there's a better solution. And so to try again, I don't think is a bad message to send back.
And we're not disregarding all the work they've already done.
Right.
To work with them.
Right, right. So I would ask, what is the risk to sending it back?
Come back
to
with the same solution.
I guess the only risk is that the offer from an uninvolved party may pull that offer back. So that may not be an option. That would be the risk, or at least one of the risks.
Good, I understand. It's helpful to know that.
Okay, any other comments or questions? So we will, how many in favor of this?
Of the motion?
Of the motion, yes.
Yes, I'm in favor of the
We have
motion.
4 in favor, those not?
Opposed?
Opposed, yes, okay, thank you all. Let's hope that it can be resolved again and
Yeah.
come back before.
I hope so. I mean,
Right. All righty. So, do we need a break, 5-minute break?
yes, please. Yes.
There we go.
Great, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
That would be.
Is the camera on?
Yep.
Okay.
We had a network interruption, so we lost 15 minutes, but we are back on now.
At the beginning, we lost?
When I first scurried
Oh,
up
you
and
did-
started
oh.
doing that, and I
Okay.
went in to see Kirk, and
How did you know? Did the light go off? Or did you get a message?
I get messages.
Oh, do you? Okay. Okay.
I suppose it's better to say I get messages than the voices in my head talk to me and tell me that the camera's not feeding. Joe sent me an email.
Oh,
and
did
said
he?
the live stream isn't working.
Yeah. I was wondering who tipped you off on that.
Looks like a cluster of chairs over here.
Getting all those down, Susan?
Oh,
At that meeting where you were asking questions and you were apologizing for asking.
It's
Have to
supposed to be
apologize.
realistic,
When I was a
it's supposed to be
teacher, when I was a
doable,
teacher,
and it's
I will,
supposed
if I
to,
ever make fun of you for
encourage
asking
long-term
questions,
change.
I quarter
But yeah,
inch.
the challenge.
Quarter inch, but that was,
Yeah, and I just really.
I think I paid the same student 75 cents, but.
You see how you, especially when you get to like week 4 or 5,
But it was one of the first day of
because
school, I said, you know,
that's
I'm
when
here
a
to
lot
help
of
you,
us,
and, you know,
I don't know if it's a
fun and
psychological
question,
barrier or something, but you kind of, you just want to quit. You just want to go back to your old habits. But because that's when those drawings start, you have to keep reporting your points. And so, you know, that's further motivation to keep going. And,
It's a
yeah,
basic thing.
it goes all the way to 8 weeks. Considering doing
Students
a
ask you a
12-week
question.
one.
You say,
and
"Oh,
the new
Good
one.
idea.
Well,
Can't even do 1
Yeah.
week.
I'm really advocating for 12.
Well, I did it, I just
I
didn't.
did 2 this summer that are the traditional try to lose the weight, because I wanted to lose weight before the wedding, and all I did was gain weight. Because my system is so messed up, and I can't process protein correctly, and all of that stuff. And this, 1.8 isn't a lot, but I was like, okay, this is the first time it's gone down instead of up.
Yeah. Yeah, I had good luck when I was home.
Even when you weren't perfect.
Yeah, so $1 what?
$1.03.
3 cents, Jen.
$1 is fine.
Those 3 cents add up.
Yeah, you don't want the weight of the copper? If only they were worth their weight.
I know.
Yeah.
Pennies are worthless because they're two-faced.
Okay.
Comfortable that way. If the information isn't complete, if the.
No, I'm excited about it, I just
someone
haven't.
says unclear, or incomprehensible, or whatever, you know, it can be all over the place, or it sounds like that's a lie, even, you know, it can be, and
And I've only done sugar once, so I feel.
10,000.
I know, even on the free days, I didn't have any.
Yeah.
It's an accuracy issue too.
No points today.
So keep asking.
Oh, well.
Tomorrow's my birthday, and so I'm going to have chocolate cake tomorrow.
Oh,
That's
I get
totally
to.
allowable.
I get
you
to.
totally get to.
You could have cake for all 3
I
meals.
could have cake all day.
You could have carrot cake and get your vegetables.
Happy birthday tomorrow.
Well,
Yeah.
happy birthday ahead of time.
Should we ask you some more questions?
I'll just say it's the birthday of some significance.
Oh, my gosh, it's the big 3-0?
You're turning 20? And you're
Your birthday
are you?
tomorrow?
Yeah.
Oh, happy birthday, Mom.
Thanks.
It'll come up on Facebook.
Yeah.
Where we all, you know.
Yeah, I'm new. I haven't even done a year on Facebook yet. So
Oh, really? Yeah, we haven't had our friendiversary yet.
Okay.
Huh, if we compiled all my time on Facebook, I'd have about a weekend.
That's how I keep track of my nieces and nephews, and I've got family in Sweden, and it is a lot less expensive.
Oh, no, seriously, I
to
get
see
it,
what they're
yeah.
doing.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Still no cell service on the Gunsmoke Trail, huh?
That's all right. Not everybody likes it.
I have cell
I'm not
service,
saying that out loud.
but just use that little machine with broadband,
Just
works
'cause the
great.
family wants privacy.
Oh,
Okay, what's it like?
really?
Yeah,
It's my grandma Char's
Yeah.
brother.
Okay.
Grandma
little Verizon
Char's
machine,
brother.
plugged into my whole system, my cell phone works great. Anybody,
Up there.
yeah, anybody who has Verizon works, as long as you're near my house. I guess there's that
There's always a fine
limitation.
print.
Yeah, yeah, but you know, my landline didn't work outside my house either.
She's at job.
All righty.
Okay, yes,
Cards.
yes. I'm not sure I'm gonna go.
You're chickening out now?
Well, I'm not chickening out. I have a manager gone, and it was really busy yesterday.
Yeah, because it was raining.
Yeah, but it's not exactly going to be a beautiful week.
Okay.
But I'm going to make my decision by 11.
Okay.
So should I make it now, and then you can just make other...
Yeah, I'll have to take a county car, because,
Oh, really?
yeah.
That's what it would mean?
Yeah, I got a leaky tire, and I don't feel like driving.
Oh, no, that's not
I have a
good.
leaky
Yeah.
tire, too.
Yeah.
What's
Huh.
going on?
You've been driving on county roads?
Well, I have,
Have you guys
yes.
been driving on county roads?
Well, my
44,
leaky
45.
tire is the one that someone put a nail in.
Oh,
Oh, bummer.
the only funny thing is that Dick has a leaky tire, too, so I was like, how many tacks are in
Huh.
your driveway?
Yeah, or who's been doing roofing near you?
Been doing roofing.
Yeah.
Right.
Huh. So that weighs in on my...
Seriously, you need to take care of your
I'm
business.
sorry, what?
Well, I do. And then I just learned yesterday that
I don't remember talking about that.
our Inuit
but,
print catalogs went out without a price list. So we're getting like tons of calls.
Oh, with the asking questions.
Yikes.
Yeah, which, totally my fault. What else is it? That's, usually you can bring it down to it's usually your fault.
The last printing I did, I spelled Voyager wrong, because I just cannot in my head get EU and UE.
Oh, yeah, there's a couple words I do that too.
Yui, Louie, and
Yeah,
Yui.
like
Or
Weimer.
Yui.
Yeah. Which way is it? EU.
I don't know.
I don't either.
The problem is
Yeah.
Word autocorrects,
Yeah, I was going to
Yeah.
say. Word
and
could
Microsoft
correct.
Office autocorrects, but Excel doesn't, and I used Excel to make a list.
Oh,
Okay. Did you
You
beat
ready,
yourself
Myron?
up about that? You didn't
No,
beat
I
yourself
just,
up about
I just
that, did you?
apologized. I said I just
Jeff,
printed
oh, or
120 of
Mrs.
these.
Oh, my gosh,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
Jeff brought that up.
I see what you mean, yeah, with the spell wrong.
I didn't even blame
Chocolate Rice Krispie bars.
Yeah.
Northern Wild.
Gee, that's unusual.
I said they
Yeah,
took the
'cause
list
they
that
usually just take it.
They took the list that I gave
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
Rein 'em
okay,
in.
we're all back here.
Okay.
So we're going to turn it over to
Okay.
Jeff, the administrator. Updates.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The update that I have would be partially a conversation and a response to Arvis's question this morning about the need for a jail, and what exactly Wold was commissioned to do for us. And the question that was asked was, and the question that I think we have to focus on first is, should we stay as a 72-hour hold facility, or should we convert to a full county jail? And the conditions under which we're operating as a 72-hour hold facility and the budget that we have to operate the way that we are, the cost justification that I'll bring to you in the next 6 weeks or so will be about the operational cost of one versus the other, and also the need for the resource of having that full level of programming in the county. The cost justification is not based on any estimates. The estimates are there so that we can program and plan the right size space. But in the first year, just looking at the cost that we spend out of the county to house prisoners versus the cost of what it would take to provide that service in the county. And then the other component is yes, if there's a proposed cost for construction, there's also a proposed cost for reconstruction in place of a 20-year-old facility. So those things will be looked at. The sizing of, and so I'd ask the board to consider operationally what's the right program for us to have in the county. That's the question we should answer first. Most of the space of the additional square footage that we need is to house the current existing law enforcement center, and the program, that space that we would need to bring the jail up to be able to operate as a 12-month. There's very little of the cost of new construction is actual beds. And I'll break all of that out. But that's the element, is do we need this service here? And it's not because there's going to be more people, more days, more beds used. It's so that we have the full range of options in public safety, in court administration, in probation administration, that all of the other counties except for 2 in the state currently have. Do we have all of those options available, taken into consideration with many other things? So it's the operational cost today, the real dollars for the last 5 years, the evaluation of what it would have cost us to operate if we were completely contained within the county. And then the question related to sizing that I would ask is, I would look down the road and say that if we sized for 28 beds and our max capacity never exceeded 25 or 26 in those 20 years that we're paying that debt service, then I would say we did a very good job of estimating. And I would say that if there were ever any time that we had to outsource anybody and send them to another county because we didn't have a bed available for them in that same period of time, then we could have done a better job of forecasting. So the question I would ask when we actually get to the point of looking at the number of beds is, are we sure that's enough? And we're not at the point of testing those numbers. We will be doing that if we authorize the schematic design process. We'll be looking at testing those numbers. So the question is related more to the operational cost, the current cost. We're not looking in a crystal ball. Yes, at some point we have to make a determination on what we would size if we decide to move forward. But the cost-benefit analysis is on the current operational dollars, the dollars that we've had the last 3 years, and could we, if we operated this here and spent that money in our county, would we, and the numbers there show that, yes, we would be money ahead every year operationally by switching that. Yes, we have to make an investment in the building. We're going to have to make an investment in a 20-year-old building anyway.
Right.
So there's a component of that. You'll get to see all those numbers, but I would just ask people to consider that's really the question we're evaluating, is what's the correct jail program for the county to sponsor? Is it the current one? Is it? And there's a couple of factors that that made us skip over that conversation. I think that conversation was had within the committee the core committee, as we were talking about the plans and developing which plan to bring forward. And we can do a better job of communicating those, and that's what I'll bring to you before we ask to move forward with architectural design.
That's great. Okay, great. Anything else on that? Yes.
I'd just like to thank whoever built our law enforcement center way back when. They built it so we could expand it. They built the facility with the ability to just expand it as needed. And I think something that a lot of public isn't aware of or don't think about is if we have an arrest on Thursday and there isn't court till Tuesday, we have to drive them to another facility and then pick them up and bring them back for court. And if for some reason they are sentenced to a term longer than 72 hours, we have to take them back to where we picked them up. And then depending on what sex the inmate is and the driver is, then we may or may not have to set up other resources for driving them. So it's a big burden on our resources of our staff and our law enforcement. And we have one dispatcher. And so you're juggling all of that. You're juggling where do we put them, how do we get them there, when do we get them back to court. And it doesn't do our citizens any good if they're arrested and being juggled around and moved around like that. It's just better for us as a community to keep our people here, especially when it's that short term. So.
Well, and as long as the Department of Corrections allows us to operate with a single dispatcher jailer, instead of always requiring a jailer to be in the building and somebody run dispatch when we have somebody in the beds, if that were to happen, it would probably add close to $200,000 a year to our operational cost. So the operational change, cash flows in the first year, it makes sense.
And as long as the state still allows us to be a 72-hour.
Right. So as long as nothing changes, we're okay kicking along the way that we are. But if anything changes, then our operational costs go up significantly. And that still doesn't address what's the cost to the community, what's the cost of not having those resources in our community, and that's the question to be evaluated. There's the other question in the community is that we're planning on oversizing this so that we can sell our beds to somebody else, and there's no way for us to cost justify oversizing this because of how far we are away. We would certainly, if we have space, we would make it available, but we won't be using available bed space and revenue as a source for a cost justification because I just don't think it would be realistic to plan on that. So it's important to know that what we're really evaluating is what's the level of service we should have in Cook County, and how does that benefit us operationally this year's budget, next year's budget, 2020, the actual budgets that we put it in place, and then we take a look at the long-term costs of managing the capital asset, which we have to do anyway. So I would share that in response to the question that was brought up today, in response to questions I've heard in the community recently, and then that would be my update for today.
I've asked Jeff to make an arrangement for me to go to jail Okay.
We have 5 beds, we have room for all of you.
We could all go to
I spent lots of time there already. I'm good.
If anyone wants to join me, I need a visual. I have never been in the jail, even when it was built 20-some years ago, to see what it looks like.
Did you want to stay overnight in the jail? or do you
Not
just wanna
necessarily, no.
Be in the
No, I
jail?
You get a huge perspective just doing a 4-hour watching everything. I mean, I dispatched for years, and it's a juggling act. And when the facility was built, there were some cost-saving adjustments that were made, which make that dispatching job kind of difficult. So I hope that those will be remedied with the new facility. And you get an idea, of how the chairs feel. Remember, they sit in them for 24 hours?
Right, that's right, they do long shifts.
Yeah.
So Jeff is going to.
So, yes, Pat is working on that. I think it's very important for commissioners who aren't familiar with that facility to understand what we do have and how it works or how it doesn't work. And then, again, we have an open invitation to go down and tour the new facility. There's no room to stay overnight because now it's in operation in Chisago County, but that will be an opportunity to meet with their commissioners and talk about their process and understand what they took into consideration. So we'll have both of those things coming up.
Okay, good.
Yeah, if I could just add, I did take a tour with the architects and engineers of the jail, and I think we can't emphasize enough that, possibly just renovating that building to keep it as it is going to cost from $1 to $2 million. And then, so timing in these situations can be very important. If we're going to spend $1.5 million, then we want to think this is the time to make a change in service, service change or service level. So there's some real needs there that need attention. As is.
Okay. Yes.
And just a final comment, it's not all about economics for me. There's a social element to having people stay home and be in their own community so that the family can visit. And I think I don't know this, but I think there have been studies about recidivism and people that have been jailed away from their families. And not only that, but the effect on the families toward.
Some of them can't travel.
Yeah.
Now, if I could just comment too, because I've had some inquiries, and I've directed people to Google the difference between a jail and a prison, because some people think we're building a prison, and that's not the case.
Good point.
They're not synonymous. A jail is basically for everyday people that get into trouble. Misdemeanors, a lot of drug, alcohol-related offenses, and they're not, severe sexual offenders or anything like that. That's what the prisons system is for felonies. And so I think there's a misunderstanding about that as well.
Yep, good point.
Okay.
Then I would, Madam Chair, I would just remind people of our schedule. On next Tuesday, we'll have Committee of the Whole. Next Thursday, we're having our joint boards meeting here at 6:00 p.m. These are listed on the agenda. And then the Fall Gala on October 23rd, up in Grand Portage. And then this upcoming week, a little bit of context on the legislative process. In September, AMC hosted a legislative conference, and we sat in our policy committees and we reviewed objectives and forwarded items to be considered under each of the committee categories: environment, natural resources, general government, health and human services, public safety, transportation, and infrastructure. And as part of the continuation of that process, this week's District 1 meeting, Northeast Regional District counties, will be meeting to review the summary of background items and legislative items that they will want to put forward as a group. And then eventually, later this year, so our Committee of the Whole next week will be also talking about this list of legislative items. So when people in the community are asking what are we doing to advocate for them in St. Paul, this is the primary source that we have to work with the Association of Minnesota Counties and review the legislative priorities and talk about the issues related to who's paying for what what's the allocation of these different things, what programs are we advocating for. And I think it would be good for us when we adopt Cook County's slate. We may pick some things that are on this list, and we may pick some things that are more local to us, and we'll want to include those in our conversation next Tuesday and carry some of those forward. But it's also important to remember the work that AMC has done for us in the change in the general government payments over the last couple of years has been changed. The formula has been changed, and it improves for many counties, and it improved for Cook County. So that process, again, will continue to the annual meeting in December of the Association of Minnesota Counties, where that slate of policy, legislative policies will be formalized, and then they'll carry that into the legislative session in February.
So we do have county reports about concerns, priorities, and accomplishments. So sometime we could get together right before all this happens at the meeting and give me your take on what you think are important things that we need to report on. And accomplishments, I think, is good, too.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. Okay.
So I don't know if we wanted to facilitate a conversation ahead of Thursday's meeting now, or if, Commissioner Storley, if you're asking people to provide feedback after the meeting, or do you want to have the conversation now?
Well, we could start now briefly, if you can think of things right now off the top of our heads. And then we keep adding to it.
Sure.
Since now.
Well, I'll start, just because it's first on our ballot background. I was at a meeting in Northholm last Thursday with N-Club, and N-Club is about 9 or 10 commissioners from all the northern Minnesota counties, and we meet monthly, and a presentation was made by Commissioner Svei, who's very involved at the state level as a vice president-elect of AMC. And we thought that we would support, and we didn't take official action, but he asked our support that number one, under Environment and Natural Resources, which I serve in that group, that AMC supports state assumption in collaboration with local government of the federal Section 404 permit program to increase efficiencies associated with local infrastructure projects. I just thought maybe I should provide a little context to that, so it's understood. Currently, when you do any kind of projects, especially dealing with water diversion or ditching or construction, there are certain designated areas in the United States or in Minnesota that if you make some changes, you got to go through the United States Army Corps of Engineers. And that has been extremely cumbersome, and sometimes it's taken 3 to 5, 6 years just to get a permit. So the intention of this, and it was attempted some time ago as well, that a state would be able to assume this. Currently, Michigan and New Jersey have this program. When it was initially proposed to the legislature some years ago, they thought that they'd have to hire too many staff. So the legislature at that time just would not go that route. Now they're thinking they can find some efficiencies in doing this, and that's why the change of proposing it again, is that if we could do this, local governments as well as individuals or businesses or whatever could have a significant improvement in the process of getting their permits, and they think this one will work. So that's basically the background on that one.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on the ballot background that?
Well, on number one, there's been another change. When they were originally looking at changing this, when the change went in, you could only make decisions on like 10% of the applicants. And now, in looking back at how this is, it flips it the other way. So then, you know, at the time of changing this, you would have still had to go through this entire process for 90% of the applications. And now that is kind of almost completely flipped, where now you can take on the responsibility for more of the applications internally. So there's a lot of things that have changed since the last time it went around. So this makes complete and total sense to support this now.
Okay, well, let's hope that's supported. I would just add that under Health and Human Services, since 1992, this provider tax has benefited Minnesota Care and so forth with medical assistance programming, and it's going to sunset the end of 2019. There's money to go out another couple years, but we don't want it to sunset. We want legislature to continue with that monies in that program. So. Anything county-wise that you think should be a concern, a priority when I report?
Okay, so you're not talking the ballot now, you're talking for your report representing the county. Okay.
Anything.
I liked your comment about accomplishments.
Yeah.
So you could hit on.
What did we accomplish?
Well, you should be right there in your campaign.
We accomplished a 17% levy and then going down to
Yeah.
what we promised at 6 or less.
We promised balancing the budget.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That we already
That's a
had.
huge accomplishment.
Yeah,
Good
okay,
for her
that's one
job.
area. That's huge.
Yep.
Madam-
Because there are a lot of counties that have big levies coming and they're probably pretty apprehensive.
Yeah. Yes.
I have the list of what, and you guys will get that this week too, but if you want to peek, I have a list of what the preliminary levies are.
Mm.
You have it too?
You could
You
send
get-
that before Thursday?
You got it at Futures.
Oh.
We're so special at Futures.
Madam Chair, I would suggest that our conversation about registration of short-term rentals is a significant issue for Cook County. And I spoke with Tim Nelson this morning, and we'll be reviewing that internally. He's going to a conference where they're going to be reviewing language and authority, and you will be seeing that issue coming before you sometime in November
Okay.
to look at a draft proposal and potentially set a public hearing for us to amend an ordinance.
I think, Madam Chair, the land exchange is very close.
Yeah.
Razor thin, and I
Yeah.
think that's a huge accomplishment, and there was some improvement in
Yes.
Pilt as well. And I think that's partially the result of efforts of groups that we belong to in the Northeast region.
Mhm.
And we're still going to get more support to try to get better state Pilt funding
Right.
in the future.
Mhm.
So,
I think you can talk about housing.
Housing, yes. Housing is moving along in